Welcome to the Quiet Place. This is my guest Ralph Epperson, author of The Unseen Hand, and also an important documentarian or filmmaker. Um, Ralph, welcome to the show. It's been a long time since we spoke. I actually wanted to lead with this question because you have a documentary or a film called Only the U.S. Has Nukes. And we see all this fuss about what's going on with North Korea. They're flying these dangerous technologies over Japan and threatening to nuke the Pacific coast. What do you still think the U.S. has no nukes? And I'm going to let you
No,
talk
no.
for as long as you need to on this subject. Lay it on me. Tell me everything.
Well, years ago, way back in about 1987, I made a DVD called Russia Has Wooden Missiles, because at that time, although that did include the evidence that they didn't have any nuclear weapons, but that was 1987. That's what, 30 years ago, or whatever it is, 30 years ago, I guess. And I still maintain that. And I'll start with this. Let's do it this way. Bill Clinton in 1992, when he accepted the Democrat national uh, uh, presidency, gave a speech, of course, when he accepted the nomination. And during that speech, Bill Clinton told us with his own mouth that he had been taught that there was a conspiracy by Dr. Carroll Quigley, because he had learned that while Bill was at Georgetown University, and in fact, not only did he learn that specifically, but he was in his Quigley's major field of foreign relations. So he took his classes. In 1996, that's not the right date, 1966, I guess it was, Bill Clinton was a student there between his sophomore and junior year. And sometime during that year, Quigley wrote Tragedy and Hope. And in my DVD entitled Clinton's Conspiracy, I document the fact that that book was required reading. So we know that Clinton read the book. He had to read it to get through Quigley's classes. So Quigley claimed that he had been made aware of a conspiracy at least 20 years before. So approximately 1946 plus 20 would be 1966. So sometime after World War II, Quigley learned there was a conspiracy. So he wrote his book to document it, and that's what he did. And we know that Clinton read it. And Clinton praised Dr. Quigley. Now, Quigley's book is entitled Tragedy and Hope. There's been a lot of tragedy, but this conspiracy is the hope of the world. Clinton believes that as well. Now, that means that there is a conspiracy. Bill has admitted there's a conspiracy. Quigley urged him to get a Rhodes Scholarship program because Cecil Rhodes was a member of this conspiracy. And so he went to Oxford for 2 years. So he got out in 68 and came back to the United States. He later on joined the Council on Foreign Relations, which was created by this conspiracy in the United States in around 1920. So now we know that there's a conspiracy. Now, if these people, by the way, in that uh, speech he gave, he admitted that it was international and that they already control the major economies of the world through central banks. Now, if that's true, then that means even though I'm told that North Korea does not have a central bank, they're going to get one if this persists and it continues. But anyway, I believe they own North Korea already. And this is the reason that Donald Trump has not, the reason is that I believe Donald Trump and his administration know there are no nuclear weapons and that he'll never get them. And the proof of that is this. If he's got the ability already to nuke us with a missile and a nuclear weapon, then you don't wait for him to launch it to see whether it's real or not, because if it's real, Americans are going to die. So he knows there are only empty rockets being fired all over the area now. That's the first clue. Now, secondly, the question is still, as it was in 1987, if there's a conspiracy and they're in charge, they're in charge, which means that this little tin pot dictator, Rocket Man they call him now, they know what he's got and they are going to make sure he doesn't get nuclear weapons. Now, here's the reason why. If they're in charge, why would they let uh, missiles with warheads in it being taken over by some terrorist organization or some Al Qaeda or IRS or ISIS or whatever, and launch them, and they would die? That doesn't make sense. If they're in charge, they don't want to get nuked. So if that's true, then we know for certain that North Korea does not and never will, and by the way, neither will Iran get a nuclear weapon because they're afraid that someone might take over that missile site with a warhead and launch it, and they might die. If they're in charge, they're in charge. Does that make sense?
Well, let's say that you're right. What is all of this in the press then about Iran nuclear talks and Kim Jong Un, flexing his alleged nuclear muscles? Now, is that just for show? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, of course it is. Let me explain. In my DVD at the very end of it, it's on the internet, by the way, you can watch it. It's called Only the U.S. Has Nukes. At the end of the DVD, I discussed, I taught at it was a summer camp once. Well, there was 8 of them, one after the other. But each time I taught a class about the Cold War. And I said, let's all pretend that we're generals of the Russian government and we're going to nuke America. What do you want to nuke? So we listed about 6 or 8 things and said, oh, we gotta nuke their army and their navy and their air force and their government, all these things. And I ended up by saying, what is the purpose of a nuclear war? Nobody wins a nuclear war. If Russia launched against us, we're going to launch against them. So Russia would never win a nuclear war. That's why they've never done it. And we've never allowed Russia or North Korea or Iran to get a nuclear weapon. We're not going to let these very wealthy people who've been spent 6,000 years of their life preparing for the New World Order, they're not going to let get nuked. They don't want to get nuked. And there are terrorists who could learn how to launch a warhead in New York City. So that's the reason. They don't want to get nuked, and they're not going to let anyone else get them. And that's the truth. They don't have them. So then, going back to my little example, every target I listed is not a target. And I'll tell you why. If you want to spend a minute or two, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, now let's say they want to nuke our nuclear sites. Now, I live in Tucson, Arizona, and FEMA put out a little drawing of the United States only in outline for the border outside, and then they filled it with little red dots. And the little red dot was over Tucson, Arizona, where I live, because Tucson had 21 Titan II missiles under a huge big metal door that opened up, and then the rocket was launched. So if Russia decided to nuke Tucson, as was the red dot, it's a serious problem. Boy, we fear Tucson getting nuked. Why would the Russians want to nuke an empty silo? As far as I know, the rocket doesn't come back and land, so it's going to be an empty silo. Why would they launch on an empty silo? So the FEMA camp was wrong. No one's going to waste a missile on an empty silo. It doesn't make sense. Secondly, Air Force bases. If there's an airplane capable of being flown after they get 45 minutes, they launch nuclear weapons, Russia did, that general in charge is going to go on a court-martial charge. He's going to order everything that'll fly to get into the air as soon as it can. Fly anywhere. I don't care where you go. just get out of there, because they don't have nukes to, nuke out every airplane, but they've got a nuke to nuke the Air Force base. So by the time it got there, there might be a few clerks running around and technicians, but you're going to nuke an empty Air Force base. Oh, the Navy, they got to nuke our Navy. I would dare say that 90% of our Navy is out to sea all the time. So how are you going to nuke them? How do you find them? Then you're going to have one nuke for every little destroyer and every aircraft carrier and every whatever else they consider to be strategic. So a Navy base is not. Or they might have a couple of ships in the Navy port, and they'll sink those or blow them up. But then that's not a target either. Well, they got to get the government. Well, the United States government during 9/11, all the people that were in the Capitol building and were down in the basement, and that basement's prepared for a nuclear attack. And the president is within 5 minutes of going to Andrews Air Force Base and getting his helicopter to get out of there. So you're not going to get our government. Now, we went through a bunch of others, but you can see none of those were suitable targets for a nuclear attack. There's only one target for the nuclear attack, and that is the mind of the people. They've got us spooked that, boy, you don't want a nuclear war, and if they ever threaten us, please do anything you can to keep us out of it. So we'll surrender, whatever. That's what it's all about. I was watching, what's the name of Meathead? Carl Reiner, whoever his name is, discussion yesterday, and he said that he remembered as being a boy, had to duck and cover in his classroom. You'd get underneath your desk, but there was never going to be a nuclear weapon. But that was to control us, to scare us half out of our wits. And then we had a Cuban Missile Crisis. There were no missiles and no warheads ever put into Cuba, but we believed there were, and they scared us. So the only target, we'll end with this last sentence, is the mind of the people worldwide. You don't want a nuclear war. If it ever comes to that, surrender, whatever you have to do. Don't let us have a nuclear, because we're both going to be destroyed. And by the way, North Korea knows that as well.
So
does that make sense to you?
Well, I guess where I don't quite understand is, if this is all just show, is it being directed? Is Kim Jong-un playing a part directed by us or by his own compulsion? I mean,
okay. Well, let's go ahead.
Yeah, that's basically what I want to ask, is who is directing this drama for the American people to keep us spooked?
Now let's go. Let's. If you watched him, he's always got a bunch of I would presume they're generals in their uniforms, and they're all beaming how proud they are. Listen, if every general in that midst knows that if little tin pot dictator launches a warhead, we're going to respond, and every one of those generals is going to die. You don't think they know that? And that if they had warheads, they would make sure that little rocket man never launched one? It takes one general with a pistol to end this whole thing. Those generals don't want a nuclear war. No one does. And they know that if he launches one and it's real and it takes out San Francisco, we're going to launch and take out wherever their capital is, and every one of those generals is going to die. And he's going to use a pistol to make sure that never happens. It doesn't make sense. And they're all smiling. Do you know, man? We're going to nuke you if you nuke us. Think about it. Those people are not dumb. They know what nuclear war is. That's why they're developing it. They want to frighten us. Now, let's go back just a couple of years ago. They had this threat as well. They're going to nuke us. They're going to get one. And sure enough, our government, I've got this all documented in my DVD. I've got a bunch of newspaper articles. They all admitted that the missiles were real, but they didn't have them yet, but they were going to get them. And then they went on to say that they thought that this pretense that they had them was used to get concessions. And sure enough, 6 months or so later, we gave them concessions. of American cash. That's what it was for. This guy's no dummy. He knows that if he gets nuked, he's not going to even have a government anymore. So he's trying to get concessions. That's my best guess. What other purpose would he have? He's not going to nuke us and destroy us with one or two or five nuclear warheads. He's going to have hundreds of them, thousands probably. So it's a charade. The word chimera means a foolish gesture. It's stupid. This whole thing is stupid.
Well, instead of concessions, President Trump has levied sanctions against North Korea, and he's actually targeted the bankers to not do business with North Korea, or to encourage them not to. Now, so if he is looking for concessions, I imagine he's barking up the wrong tree, right?
Well, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. But go back to this. Let's go back and walk with Donald Trump. Donald Trump knows that this tin pot dictator has actually threatened America's Guam, and also they're going to take out San Francisco or something on the West Coast. Now, we know that he's got rockets. We've seen those take off, and I presume that's not Photoshop. They're real, because we can track those. We've got satellites tracking this guy sneezes and we know about it. We know what's going on. So we believe it. Now, Donald Trump, is he risking the fact that he might very well launch one and blow up Guam? He's got to know that there's no warhead in that rocket, because as soon as he threatened Guam, he's going to take him out. He's got to. He doesn't want the people living on Guam to get nuked. Mm-hmm. So he's going to say, listen, Tin Pot, you're history. And he's gone. No, he knows. Donald Trump has got to know they don't have the nukes, because they're not going to ever get them. Our government's not going to make sure they never get them. Same thing with Iraq. That's why that whole story right now is ended up, we don't know whether they've got them or not. I know they don't have them and they'll never get them. Let me just throw this at you. If you're let me give you another little example. I've worked in the free enterprise system for 40 or some years of my life before I wrote my books. And I know this, the boss is in charge. So now I got a boss. My boss was the charge of 7 different branches. I worked out of Oakland. He was in San Francisco, Seattle, and he ran 7 other branches. And let's just say that one of his branch managers in Massachusetts called him and said, listen, by the way, I just learned that the branch manager is coming to Seattle with a pistol. He wants to assassinate you. What does the top president say? Okay, thank you very much. I'll make sure if he ever gets here, I'm going to take him out. No, he goes back to Seattle and has the guy arrested, because he's got the potential to do it. And he got forewarning. We've got forewarning. He's going to nuke us. You wait until he launches and then try to verify whether it's real or not? If it's real and we can't stop it, and we're not convinced yet, as far as I can tell, that we can drop all of these nukes out of the sky. If he's waiting for one to go off and it's got a nuclear warhead and he didn't take him out, then Americans are going to die. Trump is not that stupid. He's got to know they don't have them. And those generals know that if they launch, they're going to die. Now, why are they all so happy and ebullient and jumping around and smiling when he launches one of his missiles? Because they know it's not going to have a warhead and nuke somebody, so that they're going to get nuked. Human nature, nobody wants to get nuked. We've learned about that back in 1945. By the way, in my book, The Unseen Hand, I documented the fact that Harry Truman, our president, already knew that Japan was trying to surrender before he personally ordered the nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Why? Why did he do that? To get the world prepared to know that we got the nukes and that we better not let anyone else have it. That we dropped those bombs on innocent civilians. There's not one picture ever released of any of those cities showing a barracks blown up, or a base blown up, or a Navy yard all blown up, or ammunition all blown up. It's all civilians. Why? Because we wanted to convince the world that we had the nuclear weapons and you better get ready and not let anyone else ever get them, and no one else ever has. Now, I know this is strange, but think about it. It doesn't make sense. Trump is not going to risk the people in Guam or San Francisco if one of those warheads does have one of those missiles does have a warhead. He's going to take him out before he launches it, not afterwards. Think about it. Oh no, maybe we're not supposed to think. Maybe we're only supposed to sit in fear, babies. We might get nuked. Oh my God, we're gonna Donald Trump do something, protect us from the nukes. He doesn't have them. That tin pot dictator. Russia doesn't have them. China, Israel doesn't have them. Afghanistan and Pakistan. No one has them except us.
In reference to Carol Quigley's quote, I have a quote here from Carol Quigley, Bill Clinton's mentor. Sorry to change the subject so abruptly, but I believe that this sums up what he's suggested the most succinctly, and it's that there does exist and has existed for generations an international network whose aim is to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world. And he also went on to suggest that from what I've read of Tragedy and Hope, he suggests that the two-party system itself is a fraud, and that if a bill doesn't pass on one side, then they'll kick it down the curb for the other one to pass with different, wording. So basically, the parties are only different in appearance, superficially, right?
Yes, I've known that since about 1963. Little Ralphie got his start in this whole thing in 1963, after the voting in the governor's race in California. I joined the Young Republicans. They were all a bunch of hardcore conservatives trying to get Barry Goldwater their nomination in '64. And they told me to read. And I said, I don't want to read. And they said, read, none dare call it treason. And I read that book. I'm a college graduate, never heard one word about that, never suspected it, never laughed at it. No one ever talked to me there was a problem in this country until I read that book. And that started me on over 50 years now of research into over 1,100 books since then. I've read voraciously on both sides. So there's no one knows that more about this conspiracy than I do on our side. And when Quigley said both parties are controlled by the same people, notice what's happening. Donald Trump appears to be legitimate. Why? Because the rest of the Republican Party that he's a member of will not abolish what we call reject and whatever, destroy it, throw it away. They won't do it. That's to show him that we control both political parties, just like Carol Quigley predicted.
So,
and then little Sean Hannity, I sent him a note on email. I can't reach. I don't know the guy. I said, listen, Sean, you've been objecting all these years about the party not being controlled by the same people. Look around you, baby. It's happening right in front of your very eyes. If those people were true to Trump, they would get Obamacare gone in 28 seconds. But they're not doing it because both parties are controlled by the same people. Sean Hannity, figure it out. Start talking about it. Start documenting it. But Sean Hannity won't do it either, I can guarantee you.
Well, he's a bit of a Boy Scout. They want him gone from the network that he has called home for, 20 years?
Something like that, yes.
They made an example out of O'Reilly. Yeah, you're referring, the neocons are just as bad as the socialist Democrats.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
If the story of Bill O'Reilly is correct, and all we know is what's been released, I have no inside information. Bill O'Reilly was a womanizer. Now, he chased skirts all over that network, and he got into trouble. According to the stuff that's been released, they bought off these women to keep silent. So if they wanted him out, he would have been gone years ago.
Mm.
So he's doing the same thing Sean Hannity's doing. I believe that Hannity knows there's a conspiracy. Now that's an opinion. I have no proof of it except the fact that he's been on the air for 20 years. But it's like this. This is like climbing up a ladder. You start out down on the first rung where it's very simple. You talk about the Bilderbergers and the CFR, and then you keep climbing up and up and up and up until you get to the point where it's 6,000 years old. This conspiracy is not new. I proved that with a DVD called The Lion's Paw. Please check it out. If you don't like the idea, it says there are actually people that worship Satan. Oh, I don't believe that. Okay, watch it and I'll prove it to you. This thing is 6,000 years old and they control both political parties. Now, they're not going to go into that rung. They're going to stop before they get into it. So they're going to get out there and talk about this guy and that group and this objection, and they're not doing what time. And it's all window dressing to keep us satisfied that there is loyal opposition. No, there's not, because you got to talk about the 6,000-year conspiracy that's been running the world for 6,000 years. Little Ralphie proved it in The Lion's Paw, like the animal, the lion's paw, P-A-W. Please give yourself 70 minutes and watch that, and then say you're wrong, Ralph. You can't do it. Yeah, I know.
This.
I'm sorry. I got you started, didn't I?
Well, you say 6,000 years. Let's see. That would go back to I don't know. Would it go back to the end of the Holy Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire? No,
it goes back even further than that. We can talk about this, although this is like rung number 7 on a 7-layer ladder. Mm-hmm. You want to get into this?
I think so, yeah.
Are you sure, Jeremy?
Lay it on me, Ralph.
Okay, let's go.
All right.
I'm going to use the Bible. You say, oh, no, wait, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Jew. You're not going to tell me. Yes, let me just say this. They believe the book of Genesis is correct. They might not agree with the rest of it, but they believe that the universe was created by a creator God. He put, after a battle in heaven, there was against Satan, who wanted to take over from the God of the Bible. They banished him and a third of the angels to the earth. And Satan ends up in the Garden of Eden. So God creates Adam and Eve. Now, this is biblical. Oh, I don't believe. Okay, I'm telling you what they believe. You don't have to believe this, but they do, as I'm trying to prove. They believe that Satan came to Adam and Eve and said, listen, God is a tyrant. He said he gave you free choice and then told you not to use it because he feared that you would do things that he wouldn't approve of. He's going to teach you morality. And that's what God said. Don't eat. You can eat from every tree in the garden, except, well, one was called the tree of life. I don't know what that was. But the other one was the knowledge, the fruit of the knowledge of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So God didn't want us to decide what was right and wrong. Satan said, oh, yes, we do. You can do that. And guess what? Adam and Eve both ate of the fruit. Now, it's not a fruit. It wasn't an apple or a pear. It was the knowledge of good and evil. Now, that's what's going on in America. We're destroying God. God said, thou shalt have only one wife. Oh, no, we believe in living with your partner. We believe you can marry as a homosexual, lesbian, or wherever else you want. There are now people wanting a marriage license for them and their dog or their horse or pony or whatever.
God.
So marriage is gone. Families are being destroyed. They're doing everything they can to destroy the family. Because who set up the family? It was God. He told Adam and Eve, in essence, you're going to be the parents, propagate the earth by having children. So they did. It was husband and wife having children. That's all. Now, what I'm trying to point out is that America was set on a course for this. In 1782, the United States created the Great Seal of the United States. If you want to see it, get a dollar bill out. You want to get into this? This is kind of fun.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's get a dollar bill out of your wallet or purse, and let's look at one and flip it over on the back. And you're going to see that the two circles represent, as it says there, the Great Seal of the United States. You got one?
Yeah.
I never have one. I'm too poor to have a dollar bill. I have to deal with change.
Okay. Did you say on the back or
On the back side of the dollar bill.
okay, the pyramid? I mean, obviously.
Okay, there's two circles, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now what's a seal? Let me tell. Well, I'll answer my own question.
Okay.
A seal was originally designed by a king, and what he would do would be, let's say he's got a message he wants to send to King B in the neighboring nation. So he would take this message and have it written down on a piece of parchment or something, and then fold it. And then he would drop hot wax on the place where the top part meets the bottom part, so that you fold it, and then you seal it with the wax. And as it starts to cool, he would stick his ring into the wax. And that did two things. It sealed the document so that if it got to the nation number B and it had been opened, you can't remake that seal. You could melt the wax, but you don't have the ring. So the other party would know someone tampered with this thing. Secondly, it made the document official. But notice we have two seals. What do we do? What do we need a second seal for? No nation in the world that I'm able to find has a second seal, but only us Americans, we have one. Well, we can know what the second seal is for. I'll give you a little example. Let's go now to the eagle side. And you'll notice above the head of the eagle is what they call a burst. I don't know what it looks like, a bunch of clouds of explosion. And then there's 13 little five-pointed stars forming a six-pointed star. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, now forget the middle star. So we're going to take 12 of them. And we're going to draw lines, and you'll notice that you create two triangles, one pointed down and one pointed up. You see that?
Yes.
Draw the lines from left to right, top to bottom, and across the bottom and the top. And you'll have drawn a six-pointed star. You got it?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go. I'll do it this way. Go to 10 o'clock and start with that star and draw a line over to the star at 2 o'clock. And then go down to 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, wherever you want, and draw a line to 5 o'clock. That's the two parts of the line. Now go back up to the space between annuate and septus. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then draw two lines from the central point down to the bottom line, one on either side. And now you've drawn one pyramid. The point is pointed up. Then go to the top line you drew from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock down to a point above the second O in ordo. And now you've drawn a six-pointed star. Agreed?
Unfortunately.
Well, no, it's going to give us a very important clue.
Okay.
And I want you to pick that up mentally. I don't want you to do it because I don't want you to deface your dollar bill.
Right.
And take it over to the pyramid side and drop it down. And what you're going to do is you put it inside the letters. So now you've got that the 1 point above the triangle with the eye in it. You'll notice it forms a point. There's a space there. There's no letter. But over at 10 o'clock, there's the letter A. Over at the 2 o'clock, there's the letter I don't have a dollar bill, so I'm thinking S, I guess it is. Yes.
Yeah.
And you accept this. Yeah, S. Then you go down to 8 o'clock, and it's the letter N. And then you go across down to 6 o'clock, it's the letter A. And then you go over to 4 o'clock, it's the letter M. A-S-N-O-M. Now, there's a word in the dictionary called an anagram. You can look it up. Don't do it now. Just trust me. But it is a way to code a word. Just scramble the letters. So you got A-S-N-O-M. That doesn't mean A. That's alphabet. No, it doesn't. A-S-N-O-M is an anagram for the letters M-A-S-O-N.
Mason, yes.
The Masons. The Masons are telling us they designed both sides of the seal. Isn't that interesting? Now, we're not going to take the time, but boy, I'll tell you, if we started counting numbers all over that dollar bill, there's probably 30 of them, either 13, 32, or 33. It's all over the place. Now, let's go back to the eagle side.
Okay.
So now we know that the second side has a purpose. Oh, by the way, let's define annuit septus novus ordo seclorum. You notice it's around the pyramid. Agreed?
Right.
There's no letter pointing toward the space between annuit and, I'm going to pronounce it septus.
Mm-hmm.
So now you go to ASNOM. Okay, now you go to the letter A, and I was going to do this I guess I was going to point out once again the MASON. Okay, the Masons were the ones that designed it. Now let's go. Oh, we're going to define annuit septus novus ordo seclorum.
Yes.
So let's go to annuit. The announcement of, or the announcing septus, the conception. This is Latin, conception. Announcing the conception, or if you will, announcing the birth. The birth, there's a conception, meaning the birth of something. Announcing the birth of. Those two words are Latin for announcing the birth of. You go down to the word novus, is Latin for new.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Are you getting ahead of me?
World order? New world order?
Yeah.
Okay.
New world order. Announcing the birth of the new world order.
Oh,
huh?
oh,
Wait a
boy.
minute. No, George Bush made that up in 1990. No, he didn't. No, he's telling us we're going to bring you what they announced the birth of. The birth means it's a baby. Notice the eye, the triangle with the eye in it is not touching the pyramid. So the New World Order is not completed until the eye lands. And when it lands, we're going to have the New World Order. So George Bush was just announcing, saying, we're going to bring you that ourselves. We're going to fulfill the prophecy of in fact, I call it America's secret destiny, the New World Order. We were committed to it by our founding fathers, who were in the main members of the Masonic Lodge. Let me give you one more little way to count and measure. Now go to the eagle side.
Okay.
There's the eagle. This is part of the Great Seal side. The other one is intended to conceal secrets. So now we got an eagle. Now you'd have to really get a copy machine, Get a copy machine and make it as big as you can. And if you can't, you'll have to trust me. He's got a right wing and a left wing. So you go and you count the feathers on the left wing, which means on our right, it's his left wing, the eagle's left wing.
Gotcha.
And count the feathers on the wing. And strangely enough, there are 32 of them. 32 feathers, okay? So now we're going to count the right wing, and all eagles have the same number of feathers, and we're going to count 33 of them.
33 degrees.
Yeah, now why did the artist make a mistake? He didn't make a mistake because there's 32 degrees in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, and the 33rd degree runs the 32. So then notice which way the bird is looking, to the right wing of the 33rd degree.
Okay.
The 33-degree Masons run the Masons worldwide. So he's telling us the Masons run the bird. Now, if you go down to the tail, you'll find there are 9 feathers. If you can get a picture of an eagle with its feathers stretched out, there's at least 10 of them. I've never found a picture of a 9-tailed eagle. So they're telling us, by the way, the tail feathers of all birds control the flight, not the wings. They keep you going and forward, but they don't tell you which way to go.
Oh.
The tail does that. So the 9 are telling us we're running the bird, which we know is 33rd degree Masonry, because they're announcing the birth of the New World Order. See how simple it is once someone explains it to you?
Yeah.
But the point, Jeremy, I would dare say if you walked out into the street with a microphone and a recorder and said, hey, you got a dollar bill? Yeah, I do. Good. Sure. Pull one out. Yes, okay. Tell me all you know about what those symbols are. I have no idea. Wait a minute. This was designed in 1782 and was approved unanimously by our founding fathers, who were in the main members of the Masonic Lodge. Welcome aboard, Jeremy. It's not new with George Bush. He's going to try to fulfill the New World Order that he knew we had been set on a course to deliver when the baby became an adult. Huh? You
Yeah.
still there?
Yeah.
Did you fall out of your chair?
No, I'm a little bit familiar with this. I've even been told that there are ascended masters of masonry over in Asia that also have a say in international affairs. But
Now, Jeremy, if I may, just for the sake of argument, I could talk 15 minutes about those. All I'm going to tell you is that I also believe that's true. I can prove that as well. But there are 9 of them. How many tail feathers are on the eagle?
9, yes.
Somebody knew there was 9 people running this world. Now, just for the sake of argument, this is so crazy. People will not believe it, but we can show you with your own eyes and listening to Bill Clinton that there is a conspiracy. It's controlled by somebody else. It controls both parties. It controls the economies of the world. It decides whether or not you get nuclear weapons. But I'm telling you, there are 9. And someday, if you want a second program on that, we'll do it. But that's PhD level stuff.
Wow.
I did not know about that until maybe 3 years ago. No one else that I ever knew talked about it until I did. I found it and went exploring and found that it's true. But I don't want to spend time on that. This is too crazy.
Understood.
I'll tell you what, we can talk about the CFR.
One thing that we can, but one thing I wanted to ask you, because you said that you started down this crazy road in 1963, the year Kennedy was assassinated. You said that you helped on the Barry Goldwater campaign.
Yes.
Was it Kennedy's assassination that kind of propelled you into this headlong? I mean, did that motivate you at all?
No. I honestly believed that John Kennedy was a liberal. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything about him. But I read some of the papers and I said, no, I'm going to vote for. I worked for Goldwater. I read Goldwater's books. I'm from Arizona, of course, and he was from Arizona, and I never knew him. But I'm just a citizen. I don't know these high level candidates. But I read his books and I said, this man is right. So I worked in his campaign. I have to admit, I was there when he was killed, and I was in my 20s. So I remember that day I can picture what happened, who told me, and how I found out about it. And now that I know why he was killed years later, I'm very sympathetic because I know what he was trying to do for us, and he was really a good guy. And I hate to say this, but Goldwater was a bad guy.
What?
Yes, Goldwater was a bad guy. Barry Goldwater now of course he's passed, was a 33rd degree Mason. Huh? What? He's one of the people running the world. Well, he's letting the nine feathers run the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found that out and other things, I was starting to watch what he did. Well, I'll tell you, that opens up another can of worms. If you want to talk about Ronald Reagan, we can talk about him as well. I'll just say that someday when you're ready, we can talk about Ronald Reagan. I don't trust him either. I finally determined he was not on our side. Ronald Reagan.
Let's get into the CFR. You mentioned the CFR.
Okay, Quigley pointed out in the Tragedy and Hope that the CFR was created by the group that he's talking about in London, was called the Royal Institute of International Affairs. And later on in the book, you'll read where he says that they were the ones that created the CFR for the United States. So the CFR is under the control of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, this international network that Dr. Quigley learned about. By the way, let's mention this quickly. When Quigley claimed in the book that he was made privy to their secret papers 20 years before. So let's just measure 1996 minus 20. 1966 minus 20 is 1946. So Quigley, who got his PhD from Harvard, He also ended up teaching at Harvard and later Princeton, and then came to Georgetown. So here's a liberal establishment PhD writing for the conspiracy. They wanted this book written. They allowed him, according to him, to see secret papers. So now, what is the Council on Foreign Relations? Who are they? Well, you can find out from themselves. They tell you. The Council of Foreign Relations, which means they're the ones that are supposed to be in charge or controlling the foreign relations, or at least concerned about the foreign relations of the United States. And one of the ways you can know that they do that is when you determine since 1920 how many secretaries of defense, how many vice presidents, how many presidents, how many secretaries of state, whatever it is, have been members of the CFR. Ronald Reagan, well, I don't want to get into that. That takes 20 minutes. But anyway, these people always appoint. Go back to Bill Clinton. One of the reasons we know he was controlled by the CFR was after he became president, he named hundreds of CFR members to cabinet positions, judgeships, wherever he wanted. Urged them to run for Congress. The CFR runs our foreign relations. Now, do you want to get into the Cuban Missile Crisis, which covers the fact that there were no missiles there and why John Kennedy was shot?
Yes, absolutely.
This is probably layer number 4, step number 4.
Okay.
Let's go back to 62. We all know that John Kennedy, the Russians put missiles and warheads into Cuba, and they were threatening Washington, D.C. in a circle of like 1,200 miles, meaning Florida and Texas and the southern part of our nation. So we all believe that, boy, God, can do something, please. Save us from these missiles that are down there. Mm-hmm. Well, he didn't want to attack them. He had to cause war. So he decided to by the way, the CIA put U-2 air flights over Cuba and took pictures. I don't know, probably 50 pictures or so of the missiles on the ground. Because it was high altitude, it could fly at 80,000 or 70,000 feet, and the camera could count freckles on a teenage boy. That's that efficient. So they said, boy, look at here, there's all these missiles. And so Kennedy had 4 days before he announced that he saw missiles. He had the CIA come to he and his cabinet, and there's a picture of them all gathered around a table, and they brought the pictures of these missiles on the ground, and I've got pictures of 8 of those pictures. Not one of them shows a missile. Not one. What the CIA did was, after the picture was developed, they took a little piece of white tape and stuck it on there and said, this is a missile erector, this is fuel, this is the erection stand, this is a fuel tank, or whatever it is. They named a carrier, a wheeled carrier to get it to where, all these things. So, but not one little white piece of paper said missile. Later on, we found out from Duno Bruglione, the head of our CIA interpretation of pictures, came, and there was a picture in my local newspaper. He's in a Quonset hut. And he said this is one of the ways they hid their missiles from us. Now, the U-2 airplane could not penetrate the Quonset hut. So we don't know what was in that one. But Dino Bruglione said there were missiles in there. How did he know that? They bought a tent erector tents covering missiles as well. We never saw inside one of those. We didn't have any eyewitness, no pictures of people on the ground taking. There were no missiles in Cuba. None. Zip. Zero. None. Zip. Zero. The Russian ambassador admitted why there were none. I got a clip of him. Well, I guess it was an interview someplace. He said, the reason we didn't put missiles in Cuba is the same reason we don't want that tin pot dictator, Rocket Man, to have warheads. We don't want to get nuked. And we feared that someone could take these missiles with warheads and launch them against Washington, D.C. But they knew there were no missiles. They knew. They had evidence. Bobby Kennedy wrote a book called 13 Days. In fact, they just made a movie years ago. They just repeated it again for the 20th time. You can watch it. And in there were I think 18 cabinet level people, or anyway 18 people looking at these pictures. I checked the names of those people. 16 of those 20 were members of the CF Institute of International, made certain there were no warheads and missiles in Cuba.
I just have to
But the
ask.
CFRs,
I'm sorry, Ralph.
Huh?
I'm sorry, Ralph, to cut you off. It's just you went totally silent on your end as you were about to most likely make the declaration that 16 of those names were CFR members. It went mysteriously silent. Did you accidentally mute it, or?
No, I did not. I heard it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, but let's go back. I'll cover that again.
Okay.
The CIA took pictures and brought them to Kennedy and his, I presume it was cabinet and other high-level administrators. And they're all sitting around a table. I got a picture of them sitting there. Mm-hmm. And they brought the pictures in. And the pictures were to show photographic evidence from the U-2 that they had missiles in Cuba. And Bobby Kennedy, who was his brother and attorney general, wrote a book called 13 Days. And in there, he named the 18 people in that room. And I've got a list of the CFR members. And I checked. And 16 of the 18 were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. That tells me something. Kennedy was not in charge of the response ever.
You know what? It
goes on
I'm sorry, it just happened again. No, keep going though. Keep going. This is good.
Okay, I'll keep going. Okay. But I hear, when you say that, I hear an echo, which might give you some clue or something else is happening, but it's not echoing now.
Okay.
But 16 of the 18 were CFR members. That means that Kennedy was being told what to say. He had no control over that whole thing. And there's a reason for that. They wanted us to believe that we came, or then Kennedy was told to tell the Khrushchev that we're going to withdraw. You're going to withdraw your missiles, and we're going to withdraw missiles from Turkey, I think, and Greece. And in fact, you're going to learn to leave 18 or bring them out. We're going to get rid of those missiles. So they announced it, and suddenly the Russian ships were leaving with missiles on it. And I've got 8 pictures of those ships, none of which showed anything like a missile on the deck. Now, they might have had them underneath, but they've got objects on the deck covered by tarps to make us believe the tarp covers a missile. Kennedy said we will board those ships to make sure the missiles were, and he was told to say that because if we boarded those ships, we were going to go to war. That's an act of war. To take a nation's ships and board them with Coast Guard or even Navy troops, that's an act of war. So Kennedy brought us to the brink of a civil war, baby. I mean, a nuclear war. And we were taught that as Americans. He didn't do it. The CFR did. So now Kennedy then discovered someplace that the war in Vietnam was not there to train the South Vietnamese, make them into an army, because the North Vietnamese had attacked them. The purpose of the war was to, oh gosh, I won't get into that. Let's not get into that.
Okay.
But anyway, Kennedy, we already had 20,000 troops in South Vietnam. They all had clipboards. I think they did have pistols and maybe rifles, and they were told only to fire back if you're fired upon. But as far as I know, none of them ever were, but maybe I could be wrong. But anyway, so now, Kennedy said, I'm going to withdraw the first 1,000 of those troops. And then after I'm elected in 64, I'm taking every other one out. We ain't going to war. But the plans were made for a war in Vietnam in 1945 by the American government. What? What did you just say, Ralph? Yes, we planned that war in 1945.
Vietnam.
Vietnam. It didn't start until 1964.
Now, 1945 was the year that World War II ended, wasn't it?
That's correct.
So we were already looking for another conflict to get into after
Vietnam. I mean, after World War II, yes. Well, of course, we went through Korea first. That was in the 50s. But anyway, the war started in 64. John Kennedy said, we're not going to go play that game. And he issued orders to withdraw 1,000 troops before he left to go to Dallas. 1,000. I've got a copy of the actual National Security Memorandum, NSM it's called. You can read it with your own eyes. So Kennedy went to Dallas and strangely enough got assassinated. And when 4 days after his assassination, Lyndon Johnson, the vice president, who became president, canceled the orders, and within months we were at war in Vietnam. Now, during the Goldwater campaign, when Kennedy was president, we were all warned, listen, if you vote for Goldwater, within 6 months of the vote, we're going to be at war in Vietnam. And sure enough, we were at war in Vietnam, but Goldwater wasn't elected.
We would have been right. Anyway. Either way, we would have been at war, is what you're suggesting, right?
Yes. Now, let me finish the story.
Mm-hmm.
There was a reason that we brought those missiles over to convince rogue elements in the CIA, the FBI, the Secret Service, the Dallas Police Department, who else? There's 6, the Mafia, and I won't get into the 6th one. I'll do that later by mentioning my DVD. That opens up a whole new can of worms. Let's just say 5 out of 6. I'll name 5. I just did. Those people were convinced by the CIA that Kennedy had brought this nation to the brink of a nuclear war, and we had to take him out. We couldn't wait for an election. So they voluntarily helped convince the people, the elements inside their organizations to work with the CIA to kill John Kennedy. The whole thing was a huge conspiracy, and I'm able to prove it. I even named the 6th group to further show you the evidence that that was a huge conspiracy. Then the Warren Commission came about, and that was its purpose was to make sure they didn't discover the conspiracy. The Warren Commission is the biggest joke ever written on paper. The first guy that took it apart, I've forgotten his name, maybe it'll occur to me, wrote the first book and said when he read the Warren Report, he knew the Warren Report convinced him there was a conspiracy. He wrote 2 or 3 books on it. He was way ahead of me. I've read probably 50 books on that thing.
There might have been Jim Garrison.
No.
Okay.
Garrison came later. I just can't think of his name. Okay. I got a picture of him in my mind, but Garrison came later, probably, in the 70s or something.
Thereabouts, yeah.
Yeah, but Garrison was right. Oh, here's something to think about. Okay. I'll just say this. Well, though, that opens the door. Let's leave it alone. Because I won't open that door.
Oh, come on. Just give us a peek. Just give us a peek.
I'll give you a peek.
Okay.
I want you to, let's go back. Stone. What's Stone's first name?
Oliver Stone, the director.
Oliver Stone. Yeah. He's the one that made the JFK movie. Uh-huh. Now, I'm going to ask you in your mind to remember that Garrison in the movie, the actor was Costner, mm-hmm. He went to Washington, D.C. Now, let's remember what happened. He walks up the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And I've been there. You don't just walk right in. You go up a flight of stairs. There might be, I don't know how many, maybe 30, 50 of them. And you walk up it, and when he got about halfway up, Colonel X, who is not named, comes out and meets him. And then they walk back down the steps and across the street and sat in a park. Now let's start this thing. Here's Garrison and Oliver Stone telling us there's a connection between the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and John Kennedy.
There is.
He showed it, right. And he showed that Garrison was going towards the Lincoln thing, and to become aware of that. Of course, we don't make that point, but that's why he had it happen there. This event never took place. Garrison made the whole thing up. But now the camera stayed inside, or really at the end of the steps, and then watched the two of them march down the steps across the street. And every time that they got close to the end, he panned up, and there was the Washington Monument. The Washington Monument was erected by the
Masons.
Masonic Lodge.
Yes.
Huh?
Uh-huh.
Is Oliver Stone trying to tell us there's a connection between Lincoln and Kennedy, and it concerns the Masonic Lodge? And then he shows them sitting there in this grassy park area so that no one could tape it, I guess. And neither one of them had, wires. So they were sitting and talking about it. Every once in a while, Colonel X, they'd pan back and show you the Washington Monument. And it was built by Masons. So Garrison's trying to warn us. You better look out, because the Masons are somehow involved in the assassination. Now, one last thought. Colonel X, at the very end, leaves Garrison on the bench and starts walking towards the Washington Monument, as if to say that Colonel X might have been a Mason. Now, one more last thought. When I toured the country back in 85 to 90 with my first book, I ended up in Washington, D.C. And the man who picked me up at the airport and then had responsibilities of taking me to the place I'm going to speak that night, he said, listen, I took the day off. How would you like to see Washington, D.C.? I said, oh, by all means. So we drove around the city and went to and drove and stopped. And we came to the Washington Monument, to the Lincoln Memorial. I said, please stop. I want to see this. I have nothing but admiration for that president. And I walked in there and nothing but awe. And as I walked down back to the car with my friend, I noticed the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is down there. It's a long slab. I believe it's just one side. I could be, or maybe there's a little hook on the end or something. It might be to make it stand up a little better. But it's a long slab, and names of all of the 58,000, well, let's say armed forces and maybe even civilians, I don't know, Americans, are scratched, etched on that stone. And you can walk from one end to the other and read the names. And when I got there, just by happenstance, I looked down from the one end of it, walking towards the other end. I noticed that it points directly to the Washington Monument. What is that trying to tell? Is that a little clue? I don't know. But it could have pointed west or north or had wings. No, it's a long, narrow thing. And it points directly to the Washington Monument. And we know that Oliver Stone tried to warn us, I believe, that the Masons were involved, and I can assure you they were involved. But notice this, the Dallas Police Department, how do you get them to be involved? You go to them and say, listen, Kennedy brought us to the edge of a nuclear war. We've got to take him out. We can't risk a nuclear war with Russia. Please help us. I'll do anything. Well, you got to do this or go there or stand and later on testify or cover up. And strangely enough, the Dallas Police Department did that. The Secret Service, the night before they were going to be involved with the parade, 6 or 8 of them were out drinking beer and having a gay time, which is against their party, their own nomination. The Secret Service made sure there was no tall building protection. They didn't have people in the stands. Along route, they allowed the car to make a 90-degree, or a 60-degree turn on the left at the school book depository. When they had to slow down, they said that the car must always do at least 8 miles an hour, because at 8 miles an hour, it's very difficult to line a rifle with a scope on it, I guess. But they turned the corner at much less than. In fact, the driver of the car that Kennedy was in, and people still today don't believe me, he fired the fatal shot. The driver of the car fired the fatal shot. How do you know that?
Now
You can watch.
I've seen a grainy clip that where the driver looks back at Kennedy, but I could not make out if he was holding a gun or what, but it looked odd. I will say that. Now William
Okay, but
Cooper,
don't
yeah.
go ahead. Finish, Jeremy.
Well, William Cooper, I mean, did a 6 to 8 hour presentation,
Yes, we
um,
know.
uh, like presenting that footage, and like I said, I could not convince myself 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt that the driver was holding a gun on Kennedy, but I have seen that footage that you're referring to, and I don't think it's ever been satisfactorily debunked. It'd
Okay.
be kind of hard to drive and shoot a gun
No,
behind you, though,
he
right?
st- have you seen the driver stop the car right in front of Abraham Zapruder? Have you seen that? Listen, please. The Zapruder film has been edited so you don't see the car stop. There's a film taken from the other side of the street, and it actually shows the taillights going on.
Oh,
And the car stopped, and that's when he noticed one more. Okay, it wasn't a gun. Let's just throw it out. But notice this. Hold on. I'm doing a talk show. Okay, now the the driver. That's whatever the driver did. The very split second that if it was a gun, Kennedy's head explodes from the front, not from the back. It explodes from the front. Now let's cover that. Let's go to Malcolm. Oh my, somebody. He was the assistant press secretary for President Kennedy. He was in Dallas. He was in the Parkland Hospital, and the doctor walked out while he was in the hall waiting for some notices what happened to Kennedy. The doctor walked out and said to Malcolm, whatever his name is, Malcolm, the president's dead. He died at, and it says I think at 1:30. And Malcolm asked the doctor, where was he shot? And the doctor took his right index finger to the right temple, not the back of the head, the right temple. Malcolm does the same thing. You can watch him do that. He's asked, he comes into a press conference, room with all the press had gathered, and he said, hey, how was he shot? He announced, sadly, and I believe he's actually cried, which we all cried.
hmm.
But anyway, he came out, and someone said to him after he announced he died at 1 o'clock from a bullet wound, and where was he shot? And Malcolm does it with his index finger and points towards the right temple. What? Where's that shot come from? It either came from the grassy knoll or the driver. Now let's finish with the driver. Cooper claimed, now this is Bill Cooper claimed that when he was in the Navy, he was assigned to the commander, and I think, or no, the head of the NSA, I guess it was, to the top admiral, and he had top secret clearance. That's what Cooper claimed. He unfortunately did not document this, but we listened to him, and he said that when he got top secret papers, he had a top secret classification, and he had been certified by whoever determines such things, and laid on his knowledge that he was secure, wouldn't release it. But when he got out of the Navy, he finally admitted he had top secret papers that were intended for his admiral to read that said that Kennedy was shot by the driver of the car. Now, I have to admit, that's secondhand. Bill Cooper didn't. He said he looked for some way to prove it and found it in the Zapruder film. So let's just go that it wasn't a pistol. But notice the amazing coincidence. It took a second to turn around to get to that position where if he had a pistol, at that precise moment, his head exploded. Now, here's something else for you to be aware of. The next time you watch the Zapruder film, do not look at Kennedy. watch the driver and the co-driver. Here's why. The car is stopped. The driver bends the eye. This is in confirmation that there is a pistol, of course, but you say there isn't. That's fine. Just wait. Hold on a second, please.
That's fine.
I'm doing a talk show called
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't have any way to stop that. If we had talked, I have caller ID or call waiting. So I hope this will stop. I don't know. Anyway, where was I? Let's see.
The driver.
The driver. Right, the driver turns. Okay, I'm sorry. The driver and co-driver both lean forward at the same time. Their heads almost hit the dashboard. Watch both of them, not one, both. They lean forward together, and when he gets the gun, they lean back together. No one that I know has ever pointed that out except Ralph Epperson. But I challenge you, watch it. I don't think they could edit that out. Now that implies, okay, then if there was a shot, the guy had to bury the gun under the seat. And guess what? They both lean forward together, and then when the gun is deposited, if I'm right, they both lean backwards together. That's called orchestration. That's called rehearsal. Now, let's get into that. That means the co-driver also knew the car had to stop. Now, a Secret Service agent, driver, is instructed, even if you hear something, a car backfire, or a popcorn go off, or a firecracker, get Kennedy out of there. This was after at least 2 shots. He stopped the car. Go watch the documentaries. You'll see the stoplight on the car, Kennedy's car, actually on when the guy's crawling over the back on this other picture. I think it's called the next picture. Please, I'm still convinced. Oh, one more last thought. Of course, there's a bunch of cars driving through there's a parade of cars. By the way, in a parade of cars, Secret Service always has the president towards the end. No, he was the first. Well, there was one more car with the police chief in it. His car was at the beginning of the parade. Why? Why'd they do it there? And you can have fun with that question. That shows the Secret Service was involved with this as well. Now, let's go now to Zapruder. We all have watched his movie 100 times. Let's give you a little background information about Abraham Zapruder. This is not going to offend you. I'm not going to offend him. I'm going to tell you what happened. Abraham Zapruder said he got okay, let's go back. The Channel 6 News had a man at Dealey Plaza and a camera crew. And as soon as it was over and shot, he raced back to the studio to cover the incoming, to run their coverage of the assassination. He shows up out of breath, which means he was jogging, drove quickly, get there. I'm sorry, I want to tell, Kennedy's dead. And he says, so after a few minutes of this, he's talking about what they get. Zapruder shows up within hours, within minutes, I guess a half hour or so, and he's got a film. And so the guy says to Zapruder, he said, I understand that you were there in this Dealey Plaza. Yes, sir, I was. He said, did you see it? Oh, absolutely, I saw the whole thing. He said, I went down to a Dealey Plaza I bought a camera the day before. I think he says that, but anyway, here's the point that's more important. He said, I went to the scene to record it with my new camera. Now, let's ask the question. If you buy a camera and you go to a place where there's not 10 people deep, you go to the curb and you step out into the street with your camera and cover it as he's driving towards you. And when he gets close, you step back and you get him within 5-10 feet of you. But Zapruder didn't do that. Why? Why? He stepped back 30 feet. There's a little concrete post back there, big enough, probably 2 foot square, that he could stand on and elevate him over the crowd and get a telephoto zoom in on the Kennedy car. But he says he brought his secretary with him. Huh? And that she gave him a bear hug. What? How many people have you ever seen take motion pictures with a camera with someone holding them in position with a bear hug.
I
He
haven't seen
told,
too many women give a bear hug, to be honest. So, yeah, go ahead.
but she stood behind him with her arms clenching his arms so he could rotate and cover. Why would he do that? Because he knew there were going to be shots. He knew. He had to know. Any normal photographer, go down to the curb. You don't have to get 20 people behind them. Just step there. There's no one in front of you. Step into the curb and watch the car come. You can get within 5 feet of Kennedy. He goes back and then brings his secretary with him. Now, I have to theorize, this is my conjecture, that he knew there were going to be shots. And he's not going to stand on the curb because he could get shot. Think about it. No one has asked why is Zapruders back on this post except little Ralphie Epperson. Why? I've not seen it in any book, in any DVD, in any documentary. No one asked him. Now, let's now cover 25 years later. Dr. Crenshaw was in the room trying to save John Kennedy. He bought the lie. In fact, he was told everyone in that room was ordered by an admiral. What's an admiral doing in the Parkland Hospital? What's he doing? Well, he somehow showed up. He ordered everyone in there, including the doctors who were from the hospital, to never talk about this to anybody. So Crenshaw kept his truth. He never mentioned it. There's a picture of Crenshaw and the whole staff of 25 people in the emergency room on some steps, and you can see Crenshaw as a young man. He must have been like in his 30s. But sometime later, when Crenshaw's getting old, he decides to tell the truth. So Crenshaw goes to the major networks and said, I've got evidence that Kennedy was shot from the front. Well, how did you know that? So Crenshaw takes the reporter with CBS, I don't know, it was like NBC, CBS, 2 separate major networks, and says to them, in the room where Kennedy was taken care of, because Crenshaw was in there doing everything he could to save his life. He says, they brought Kennedy's body in. The first thing we noticed was this gaping hole on the side of his right temple. And Crenshaw does the same thing that Malcolm did and the first doctor did. He points towards the right temple. Where'd that shot come from? If it didn't come from the front, or maybe even the driver. Now, Crenshaw did a duplicate of that with another major network. You can watch this as well. And he goes in there with the second reporter. Where was he shot? In the right temple. So there's no question. Now, official portraits taken during the assassination show John Kennedy's head with his eyes, I believe they're open. And you can see there's no damage to the right temple. Huh? What?
You're right. Yeah, I've seen that picture. Yeah.
Wait a minute. Doctors are telling us, the staff, the secretary tells us, he talked to the doctor. Kennedy's personal physician was in that room. He watched the whole thing take place. But that picture shows his body, his head. There's no damage to the right temple. What does that tell us? It was real. Do you understand? The evidence of a conspiracy is overwhelming. You cannot look at the evidence and conclude it was one lunatic. Let me give you further evidence. You ready for this?
Yep.
Jeremy, are you still sitting?
Yeah. I've heard a lot of this. I've just never heard the suggestion that Zapruder even was in on it. Now that's new to me. But yeah, go ahead.
Right. Okay, now let's cover one more further evidence.
Okay.
That the Warren Commission knew, I'll repeat the word knew, they knew that Oswald could not have shot President Kennedy. There's a photograph in the Warren Commission. Now, how do we know that? You can see the picture by getting a copy and look for yourself. Now, let's go back to what happened to the car. The car came in on Main Street going west and made a northbound swing on Elm or Houston, and then he made a left-hand turn right in front of the school book depository and went down towards the underpass, and then went through there and went to the Parkland Hospital. Now let's go back to the where did I bring that up? Oh, yes, right. Okay, now there is no photographer who captures the sixth floor window except one, and there's some movement. Something was up there in that room, but there's no rifle, and because it's way at a distance, a block away, and they've magnified it, but there's no rifle. Now, as the car passed through there, and just after the first shot, Kennedy was shot in the back, and the bullet exited or it came from the front and got him in the neck. And he reached up with his arms. Both of his arms reflexed up and he touched his neck. This picture was taken just a split second after Kennedy did that. Now, how do we know that? The photographer is in the street on the driver's side of the car. And you can see the bumper, the grill, and the hood, and the windshield, and the two drivers, and just barely make out Kennedy's arms underneath the mirror. So this picture was taken just a split second. It's called the Altgens photograph. Altgens. Altgens. He was a reporter for Associated Press or UPI or something, and he took this picture. Now, he was shooting back towards the school book depository, and there's nothing constricting his access to the building itself because it's higher up than he was. Now, when you went into the school book depository, you did not just walk in. You climbed a flight of stairs, maybe a dozen of them, and then entered into a covered room. And then at the end of that little room, you can enter freely if no doors to open. You just walk in and start walking, and you get the doors, then go inside the building. There were people standing on the sidewalk, and in the left-hand side stands Lee Harvey Oswald. Please go to the Altgens photograph and look into the doorway, and you'll see Lee Harvey Oswald standing in the doorway. If he's there, how can he be shooting from the sixth floor? It's not possible. Oh, yes, it is. Now, wait a minute, Ralph. Come on, surely you're wrong. Okay, let me tell you, only little Ralphie Epperson's done this. Little Ralphie Epperson took a blow-up of that little picture and showed you pictures of Oswald, taken a dozen of them. He was captured, as you know, that day and brought back to the Dallas Police Department or somewhere, the sheriff, wherever it was. And there were pictures of him walking in the hall in an elevator, going past everybody. He's wearing a T-shirt, a white T-shirt, and a little jacket or shirt jacket, and it's buttoned in such a way that it's buttoned about 2/3 of the way down, and there's a strange little crease in it. If you start with his neck on the right side, his right side, and follow that line of his little jacket, there's a little crease where it implies that it's got a fold and it kind of bent, and then it goes back down to where it's buttoned at the bottom. And every one of the pictures of Oswald inside the Dallas Police Department when he's wearing the shirt and the coat show the same T-shirt and the same jacket. Why? It's clear. It's him in the doorway.
I'm looking at the Altgens photograph, a close-up of it, and the face, I mean, is a dead ringer for Oswald.
Notice one thing. Let's talk about there's one evidence they tried to fool us. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, people went to the Warren Commission. No, wait a minute. He's in the doorway. And they said, no, that's Billy Lovelady, who also worked at the school book depository. Let me show you. That picture of the head looks like Oswald, but notice his hair. There's a little dip, what you call it, in the center. It comes across and comes back on his head, and then comes around like a horseshoe, and then comes out. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, now let's cover this. Only little Ralphie Epperson's talked about this strange paradox. See, little Ralphie's always ahead of everybody else. I wonder why. Because I'm independent. No one tells me what to look for. I do it on my own. Now, they were convinced, and if you can look, if there might be a white arrow pointed towards Oswald's head, and it might say something about Billy. Can you see that? It's a white arrow cut out of something that stuck to the picture. It might not be in the one you've got, but later on you'll see it, I think, in the Warren Commission. They claim that's Billy Lovelady. Now, in February, which is just 3 months, December, November, December, January, February, 3 months later, the Warren Commission questioned Billy Lovelady. And they said to Billy Lovelady, please show up wearing the clothing you wore the day of the assassination. They specifically asked him to do that. So Billy Lovelady he forgot what he was wearing. Because he came there with a white t-shirt and a striped shirt. The stripes are 3 inches across. Now, it's a black and white picture, but I've read where it's a bright red. There's no red stripe on Oswald's jacket. But notice, the picture of Oswald shows that little strange little dip, which implies to me that they tried to get that dip in the hair on the picture of Oswald so that they could say it was Billy Lovelady. But the shirt and the t-shirt proves without a doubt it's Lee Harvey Oswald. And the way to prove that is Google Lee Harvey Oswald the day that he's in the Dallas Police Department, and you'll see probably a dozen pictures of him wearing identically the same t-shirt and the same jacket. It's clear that's Oswald. Now, if he's on the first floor, or second floor, if you will, how can he be in the 6th floor? How come? Oswald, he must have been a magician. Being able to be in 2 places at the same time. Secondly, when the policeman found the rifle, they said it was oh boy. They claimed it was a Mannlicher Carcano, but it wasn't. It was a German, a Mauser. They picked up a Mauser. Policeman identified the rifle in that room on the 6th floor as a Mauser. People who are policemen. One of the guys who ran a hardware store that sold rifles testified it was a Mauser. But it shows up later as a Mannlicher Carcano. By the way, the Mannlicher Carcano was such an inefficient weapon, it could never have killed anybody. First of all, it's a bolt-action rifle, and Oswald was left-handed. Huh? His mother said he was left-handed. The bolt of the rifle's on the right-hand side. Huh? Think about that. You're not used to using your right hand, holding the rifle with your left. You have to hold it with his right. And then how do you reach over the top with your left hand he'd have to do it with his right hand. He's not used to using that. And then notice this, he was using a sight. Notice when you got a sight, the picture inside that sight is very small. He's shooting at a moving target. He's got to move the bolt back and forth to put the next shell in and then go back with the sight to find Kennedy.
Yeah.
That takes skill. And then he fires a 3rd shot. He's got to go through the same thing again. That doesn't. Now, secondly, when the FBI tested the rifle, the scope was so loose, it wobbled. They had to put a shim underneath it to get it right. What? The scope wobbled? Oswald was shooting with a scope that wobbled? Do you understand? This is evidence, abundant evidence of the enormous cover-up of that conspiracy. Well, I'll tell you, well, that's just only a beginning of what I've discovered yet. Someday I'll talk about group number 6 rather.
Group number 6.
There's 5 others. Dallas Police Department, the Mafia. Oh, by the way, how did Zapruder know about the shooting? Jack Ruby? Jack Ruby was everywhere that day. Jack Ruby shows up at Parkland Hospital. Huh? How did Ruby get to the Parkland Hospital? He claims he wasn't in Dealey Plaza, but he was in the Parkland Hospital.
Huh.
They claim that Ruby dropped this pristine bullet on one of those trays that they carried Connolly on. Not Kennedy, Connolly. And somebody found it and said, oh, this must be the pristine bullet that's supposed to have hit both Kennedy and Governor Connolly. And that's impossible.
Now Connolly was seated directly in front of Kennedy in the middle seat, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And
Now, both of those men, they
go,
were both injured, and by this pristine bullet that has very little damage to it, yet it hit Connolly's bones, went through flesh, moved, jagged, went through broke bones in his ribs, and then went through his ankle, his thigh, and then hit his hand, I think. 3 times, and that bullet didn't have any damage. That's the third bullet. Huh? Now, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. This whole thing doesn't make sense. It's just, it boggles the mind that anyone could believe the Warren Commission report.
I think the people who believe it are more in the minority than the people who don't. The conjecture about there being a massive cover up with Kennedy, the Kennedy assassination, it's so widely understood that I just think that the so-called debunkers are in the minority. The skeptics, for the sake of being skeptic, if you want to be skeptics, I mean, be skeptic of official stories, because those things are always chock full of holes. Am I right?
Let me tell you, there's evidence that Ruby knew Lee Harvey Oswald. Remember that Ruby ran a strippers club, and the strippers saw Ruby, Officer Tippit, with Lee Harvey Oswald. Strangely enough, those strippers who saw it, strangely enough, they all ended up committing suicide. I'll be darned. Boy, it must have been, when they talked those words, they was bitter in their mouth. They must have poisoned them. So now, let's cover Jack Ruby. Ruby gets to Parkland Hospital, and people claim drops the bullet on the tray. Then he shows up at the police department because he knew a bunch of policemen who allowed him inside because of his connections at the strippers club. The officers used to go there and have free beer, but they could watch the strippers and did not pay for it. Hey, baby, I like you. You're my buddy. So he's down in there. There's a press conference being held, and you can watch this. The cameraman is on the, let's say, the east side, shooting across to the front over the people, and then he pads a little bit to the left to see the west side. So the sheriff is up there saying, we now have a subject, Lee Oswald, I think he said, or maybe Oswald, Lee Harvey. He said he was a member of the We Love Cuba committee. Jack Ruby corrected him and said, it was called the Fair Play for Cuba committee. How did Ruby know that? You can watch him say that. He says it was called the Fair Play for Cuba. There was only one member of that committee, Lee Harvey Oswald. And Ruby knew it as well. He corrected the sheriff, or the police chief. No, you can hear him. He shouts out, it was called the Fair Play for Cuba committee. Then the sheriff said, oh yeah, Fair Play for Cuba committee. Then Oswald escapes, gets out of the building, and goes towards the theater. He did not shoot Officer Tippit. Eyewitnesses, 3 of them said, the man who shot him was short, stocky, with curly hair. Oswald was slender, with black, straight hair. Oswald was captured with a pistol, and the man who shot him had a revolver. Revolvers eject cartridges. Pistols do not. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. So they found cartridges at the scene where Tippit was shot, but they found no cartridges from the pistol. When he went to the theater, who was also seen only one witness, I admit, you have to take this witness, but this witness saw Jack Ruby in the theater. Why? Why was Ruby in the theater? Because Lee Harvey Oswald was
Was
going to wait for the pilot to show up to fly him to Castro's Cuba so Oswald could assassinate Fidel Castro. Huh?
well,
What?
yeah. So Oswald was working for us. I mean, it's become more and more clear that he was working with the FBI, right? I mean, he was
Well,
an
the
informant.
CIA.
Okay, CIA. He was an
He was,
informant at the very least.
yes.
Yeah.
Lee Harvey Oswald, his own mother testified that he was an agent. Okay, let's go back. Oswald was found in the Marine Corps, I believe in Japan. I think it was, I don't know for sure the year, I think it was 59. And they said, listen, Lee Harvey Oswald, we've checked your background. You've got the skills to become a trained assassin. And we want you to become a skilled assassin because we want you to kill Fidel Castro. And when you do, you'll be called a hero because we all know that Castro's a crummy communist, has murdered people, and we want him out, and you're going to help us kill him. We're going to train you. Well, we're not going to train you. We're going to send you to Russia. So Oswald started speaking Russian. He was called Oswaldsky or something by his fellow Marines. So they knew something was up. Oswald's learning Russian. What's he doing that for? So a short time later, he got out of the Army, or Marine Corps, because his mother was ill. His mother wasn't ill. That's confirmed. So they let him out. They didn't check to see if Mama was ill. They said, okay, goodbye. Someone paid for an airplane flight to Copenhagen, Denmark, so he could land and then fly someplace or somehow into Russia. Why did he fly to Russia? He went to Minsk, where the KGB has an assassination squad. They teach their assassins how to assassinate with rifles and pistols. And Oswald was trained by the KGB to kill Fidel Castro. When he gets out, he marries the wife, and she's a Russian. He brings her back to America, and suddenly he gets in touch with the people, and they're learning how. He gets involved with this new lady that steps up, and she's trying to develop some sort of cancer that Lee Oswald could use to give to Castro to kill him. So she's involved with that. That's the latest story. This lady that worked with him and some PhD about trying to develop some cancer. Her name is Judy somebody. You can check her 2 books out and you can read it. It's something new.
Judith Veris Baker, and she
Yeah.
wrote Me and Lee and also Dr. Mary's Monkey about her research into cures for cancer and also her time with Lee Harvey Oswald in the moments leading in the days leading up to the JFK assassination. I'm actually reading Me and Lee right now, so yeah, she's in
Okay.
hiding, I believe. So
You could. I wonder why. Okay, now let's give you one more little bit of story. There is a video on the internet, an interview of a very attractive, clean-cut secretary type, maybe even like a school teacher, attractive, very lovely young lady, and she's sitting there in a room with, I believe it's her father, and she's testifying to the interviewer that she saw Jack Ruby in Dealey Plaza walking up the grassy knoll. Huh? No, I'm sorry, forgive me. Saw him in the car. Okay, so let's cover that. She was on, I'm going to call that Elm Street. I don't know what it was called, but let's just go. She was on Elm Street, and there was traffic congestion because for some reason you can't get them onto the Stemmons Freeway, which that's where this road leads. So she's slowed down, and she finally gets parallel to a pickup truck that's half on the curb and half on the street and half above on the sidewalk. And as she gets there, she stops her car because the traffic stops her, and she looks to the right, and sitting in the driver's seat was Jack Ruby. She said, I didn't know who he was, but he's got a very distinctive face. In fact, I sat and looked at him a couple of times and said, well, I wonder what he's doing here in a pickup truck. So she went about her business, and later on, she saw Jack Ruby shoot Oswald and said, that's the man that I saw with the pickup truck within an hour of the assassination. what he did was let a man out on the other side who walked up the hill carrying a gun case, a plastic or leather gun case. She watched that as well.
Oh.
So Ruby was there helping them get the people behind the grassy knoll. We know there are shooters back there. We've got eyewitnesses to that. You maybe seen the DVD of the man who was deaf. He saw them back there putting their guns away and hiding, covering up the bullets or wherever it was. He saw it with his own eyes. But since he was deaf, he couldn't get anybody to listen. He'd go to the police department and say, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to talk to you with my... They didn't know what sign language was. They didn't know he saw it. So they got him and interviewed him. And he walks you through it. He saw the people behind the grassy knoll. He couldn't identify them. He saw the cars they were driving. I'm telling you, the stories, if you go to Google Kennedy assassination videos, you'll be convinced 100% there's a huge conspiracy killing our president. Okay?
Yeah.
So this lady now, you can watch her. Unfortunately, I don't remember her name, but she, by the way, her testimony is in the Warren Commission. And she said she didn't say what she said.
It was altered,
She said. In fact, they said it was notarized, which I believe would require her to sign it. She said there was no notarized statement, and I signed nothing.
And she had no counsel that entire day that she was there. No one ever came to as an advocate, right, or to document what she said, right?
Yes. Notice if I may, Jeremy, I'm saying some things, and I don't mean to say that I'm better than anybody. I'm not, but I'm curious, and since I have no one controlling me, I just go where the doors open, and doors have opened, and I've learned more about the Kennedy assassination, and I've read at least 50 books. I've got probably 50 copies of documentaries on VHS tape that I've recorded as they were shown back. Whenever they were on, I went to a VCR and recorded. I've got them still there in my home. So I've got all these things, and I'm convinced I'm right, 100%.
I don't think you're alone in that at all. I think it's sad that even though the top secret files pertinent to the assassination would, we would be getting closer to seeing them finally declassified. I just feel like they're going to hold out on us a little bit longer. And what can we really do about it? I mean, if they choose to, or they could just release disinformation like they have been all along. How can we ever really know? That's the problem.
Jeremy, I've got one way for you to I'm hearing an echo, which okay, now I think it's okay. Jeremy, let me say, there's one more thing you might want to watch for.
Okay.
And I believe it's connected to the Zapruder film. It's this is part B, and then there's a part C. In part B, Frank Church, a senator from Idaho, is in charge of some committee on the CIA, and he's sitting in the room with all the other senators, in their seats, and the audience and the cameras and the recorder press. And facing him is another table with, I believe, I could be wrong, I'll just say William Colby. It might be another one, but if you see him, you'll recognize him as being head of the CIA at one time. So he's sitting there, and there's a camera at the end. He's sitting at the end of the table, which means on his right the table goes on, but on his left there's a foot, and then it stops, and then there's an aisle, and then there's a bunch of people or maybe photographers. So he's sitting at the end of the table, and they're asking him questions about this pistol. Church says, "Did you bring that pistol we talked about?" "Yes, sure I did." He said, "This pistol that could be used to assassinate somebody." He said, "Oh yeah, but it could be, but it's never been used for that purpose." "Well, did you bring it?" Now hold on, let's just go slow. At the end of that table is a cameraman, and he starts recording, and you can see behind on his right side somebody get up out of his chair and then pick up something in front of him, and then he puts it in his left hand and walks around the end of the table so that the cameraman can see it. And then he walks around and takes it up to the front and puts it in front of Barry Goldwater. Now, that's a very important thing. Let's just end with that. First of all, when he comes around the corner, you can see the gun is black, but it's also very shiny. As it gets to a position where the lights behind the cameraman are on it, it shines up shiny, even though it's a black pistol. Now, I'm told gunmetal does that. I don't know anything about guns, but many times black pistols show up shiny, and you see it shine as it walks by. No question. It looks like a 45, but this pistol has a scope on top. So I'll have to concede that's. But notice this: it ends up in the hands of Barry Goldwater. Goldwater's on the committee, but he's way down the end of the line from Frank Church. So Goldwater picks up, and the cameraman starts, like most men, he picks up the pistol, puts it to his eye, where the sight is, to his eye, and then he looks through the scope at the ceiling and looks like he's shooting, and then puts it down, and then I guess it goes back to Church. This became a subject for the filmmakers to wonder why. How come Goldwater first? So there's a picture, a movie of, I'm going to say Walter Mondale. I could be someone else, but he's another well-known senator, and you'll see him in the video, and you'll recognize him. Maybe he ran like 30 years ago, but this session was probably 30 years ago. So the guy says to him, how come Goldwater, by the pictures of Goldwater with this gun were taken and released all over the country. I've got a still of it in my files. So they laughed and said, how come Goldwater got the gun first? And he said, Mondale, I said, I talked to Barry about that. I said, how did you learn that, Barry? And he said, I learned it from Hubert Humphrey. He got the gun first. Now, this is Ralph Epperson's theory. I have no way to prove this, except my experience with Barry Goldwater. Trust me. Well, let's just say it this way. Goldwater, before the assassination, we who were working in the Goldwater campaign kept reading the polls, and Goldwater was going to defeat John Kennedy. We were so anxious. We got him the nomination, and we're running a campaign that's going to elect him until the assassination came. So that if the gun did this, this is the gun that did it. And they wanted Goldwater to handle it first, as a way of saying, this is the gun that kept you out of the presidency. That is conjecture. That's high. But notice, it became a subject of discussion, and photographs were taken. Not of Frank Church holding the gun, who should have done it originally, but Barry Goldwater, no one else. Now, I cannot prove. If it was the gun, they put a scope on it. I admit the scope is very evident. And, of course, pistols normally don't have scopes. I don't know why they did it, but that's it. Was that the gun? I cannot say, but it's just very strange that Barry Goldwater touched it first. Ha ha.
He's smirking in this picture here that I'm looking at.
Okay, you got it now.
Yeah, I'm seeing
What's
it.
he doing with the gun?
Well, in one picture he is looking through the scope. Yeah, in another one he's smirking and with his finger just to the right of the trigger, like he's smirking as if to say, like he's like kind of walking a mile in the killer's shoes, I guess. I mean.
Okay, now, does the gun look black or silvery?
I would say the scope is black and the actual gun part is, silvery. It looks silver to me.
See, unfortunately, if you watch the video, you'll see the gun is black as well, which implies, once again, going back to the gun that's in the hands of the driver, it's even whatever it was, whatever he did that for, at the very second he was able to see Kennedy point blank, he moved his head and stopped. At the very moment that he stopped, Kennedy's head exploded from the left, his right temple. And by the way, you can see that on the Zapruder film. There's a huge big blood. This is not very pleasant to talk about, but it looks like flesh and blood splattered, and there's a thing flapping in his face. Mm. What is that? I don't know. I still don't know. But something's going on.
It's the skull cap, right? I mean, it's skin, right? That's come loose, isn't it? I mean,
Well, excuse me. My mouth is very dry, and I've been sitting here with a soft drink and sipping it to keep my mouth from drying up. And unfortunately, I swallowed too quickly, so I had to cough.
well, we're about to wrap up, but yeah, go ahead and let's finish this. Whatever we're getting to here. Yeah.
Well, I just want I want you to see that the evidence. By the way, if you want to watch, I'm sorry, I cannot remember where I put the evidence of this sixth group, but I document the evidence of their involvement directly in the assassination. It only takes but 5 minutes, but it's going to show you and why they were involved. It's a very major story, and nobody in any book or any lecture, any taping, nothing. No one's ever mentioned this. Only little Ralph, fearless Ralph Epperson, on his white charger with his fiery sword of truth and a metal covering to protect me, charges in where no one else charges to enter.
Not even Alex Jones, right? Not even.
Well, I do better than Alex Jones. I'm saying things that okay, let's finish with this thought.
Go ahead.
Very quick. What was the reason for the Vietnamese War? Why was it so important for them to kill Kennedy to have this war they planned 19 years in advance? And the answer is drugs, drugs, drugs.
The poppy fields, right?
No, well, yes, but it's far more important than that. I don't think I should cover this, but I'll tell you this. If you want to learn about it, find my DVD called Vietnam, America's Betrayal and Treason. Vietnam, America's Betrayal and Treason. Oh, it's 4 hours long, Ralph. I can't watch any 4-hour video.
I can.
How long is the Super Bowl? Oh, that'll last 6 hours, and I'll sit there and watch every second of it, except when I got to go, drink when I leave the room. But no, I don't care. Watch it. I guarantee you it'll be more evidence of what that war was all about and why Kennedy was shot. He didn't want to go to war in Vietnam, and so they took him out. This conspiracy took him out intentionally to prevent him from stopping the war that had been planned 19 years in advance by our own government. Oh, I don't believe that, Ralph. Oh, why would you say it? That's not very patriotic, Ralph. No, it wasn't what they did. Wait till you see it.
Huh. Well,
give me 4 hours and then tell me what you saw.
Sure. Yeah, I think that a 4-hour film about America's past and possibly future is far more easy for me to devote my attentions to than the Super Bowl. To be honest, I can totally hang with a 4-hour movie. That's not a problem to me. I'll have to have you back to. Maybe we should make this a regular thing because I know that you're just a well of alternative research and everything, and I know that we didn't even get to everything we could have or wanted to. So, like I said, I'll have to have you back very soon. But if you want to, promote your site a little bit before we wrap this up, go right ahead.
First of all, will this be archived?
Yes.
Would you make sure that you send me a notice of that?
I certainly will. I'll keep you.
And please keep it up for a while, Jeremy, as long as you can.
I certainly will.
On other programs, urge people to listen to this. Please understand, I covered stuff that no one else is saying. Now, I'm not proud of that. I wish I didn't have to do it, but if I don't do it, no one else has done it.
Right.
Now, not everything I talked about is certainly, new, but I answered some questions for those who wonder why they know what happened. Ralph-Epperson, www.ralph-Epperson, R-A-L-P-H. If you'll put this on your website, Epperson, EPPERSON.com. That's my website. Google Ralph Epperson, Google Images, Google Ralph Epperson, and watch. Get busy watching to cover evidence that you need to know so you can convince others of the truth of what I've presented. I need to get this information out. I can't do it alone. I try. That's all I can do. I don't have any money. I'm not. They don't get rich selling books. I have a sign in front of me that says, "We'll sell books for food." So I take that on street corners and stand there. And once in a while, people say, "Oh, I'll give you money, Ralph." I make more money collecting on street corners than I do by selling books.
Well, they say if you get into writing to make money, then you might be in the wrong field. But I think you're exactly where you need to be, Ralph. And I thank you very much for your time. And rest assured, I'll have you back to do this again, and I will tell everyone I know to make sure that they tune into this.
Jeremy, I can't thank you enough. You've been very kind to me. I appreciate all that you've given me the time and you allowed me to say some things that are very controversial. I'll be happy to come back when you ask. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Have a good night.